There are a lot of things that move in video games, and lots of those moving things need animation. Hey there, I'm Cyber Chroma. I made a game in 9 days, not for any sort of competition or whatever, just as a fun little challenge to plan, make, and complete a game in a short amount of time. And now I want to make a tutorial out of something that I did while making that game. Something that when I made, I went, oh cool, I didn't know that was a thing that could be done. Neat. And so now, I'm passing that new knowledge to you. So to talk about something specific I made in this game of mine, let me first briefly show you the game itself, called No Time to Think. So here we have the game, and you don't gotta worry about everything else going on here, but basically we have a character that moves around in a grid on a timer, kinda like Snake, and there's different obstacles that you gotta move around. Enemies, springs, all that. And you gotta get to a goal. So what we're going to focus on here is how the player moves from square to square. This cube doesn't just snap to the next grid space, it has a nice bouncy squash and stretch animation. More dynamic movement is just more interesting. Now, though this cube can move in 4 different directions and thus has 4 ways to stretch, there's actually only one animation being used here. So this is something I'm calling animation overriding. Basically the idea of having one animation and being able to reuse it in different contexts with the magic that is coding. Now, there are probably so many different places that you can use this kind of thing, but we're going to use as an example the way that I used it on this player here. So this is that singular animation that we're working with here. Sometimes when you animate a character in a game, say to do a run animation, you'd animate a character running in place, then move a parent game object to actually move the player around. I could have done that here, but since the player moves in these fixed grid increments, I decided to actually have the animation include the movement all the way to the next square. Also made it easier to see the timing of this squash and stretch animation in motion, rather than trying to decipher this weirdness when it's moving in place. So with this one animation that stretches upwards, how can we use this to stretch the cube downwards? There can be many solutions to approach this problem, some have different pros and cons. This is the one that I wanted to go with, and for me, it worked wonderfully. This is the part of the code that controls the player, and we can ignore most of it except the parts we actually want to change. All that you need to know is that there's this moving direction variable that's deciding what way the player is currently moving, so up, down, left, or right. Depending on that direction, we can do different stuff. Well, if we try to change the position of the animated object in update, say by putting in some random position we want to set it to, we'll quickly find that it does nothing. The animation takes over and just does the upwards version regardless of what we do in update. Trying to change the position just doesn't matter. This is caused by the order that things run behind the scenes not being in our favor here. You see, in Unity there's this handy reference image for the order that Unity's special functions run. As you can see, the update function runs early on, then later in the same frame, Unity does the animation calculations and sets the positions for what the animation wants it to be. So are we out of luck? No, with our secret weapon, late update. If the name isn't descriptive enough, late update is like update in that it runs every frame, but it runs even later in the frame. In our case, it even runs after all of the animation calculations. So how can we use this? This means that in late update, we could just override the animation entirely by setting the position of the object to whatever we want. Or, where we get more cool and interesting behavior, is by looking at where the animation has decided where the object should be, and then do additional stuff with that. We could just take the position that we know is going to go up the relative amount that we want it to upwards, and just invert the z value to have it go the same amount downwards. And by having this code run in late update instead, we'll find this time it actually does something. And just like that, the animation is flipped. With just knowing the right techniques, just a little bit of code can be so powerful. We can then take this a step further and make the same animation work for the left and right directions with some more trickery. In the case of left and right, rather than moving on the z-axis, we want to move on the x. So rather than just inverting a value, we can swap those two parts of the position in late update. For the squashing and stretching, we'll then also want to swap the x and z parts of the scale too. That'll now move us to the right, adding on to that and moving to the left is just a matter of another inversion. Now that's just one animation being used 4 ways. If I now wanted to adjust the timing of the animation, I only have to do it once and don't have to worry about making the same small tweaks over and over and just hoping that I copy all the values correctly. Again, this is a very specific example of how you may apply this technique, but it surely isn't the only one. And with that, I challenge you to try to find more ways to get more out of your animations. It doesn't have to just be to cut down on the number of individual animations that you make. You could take what an animation is doing and make tweaks based on a character's speed, or make something move more chaotically with randomness. Who knows? So that's all for this tutorial. If you're curious on the game that this was a part of, No Time to Think, you can play it if you'd like from the description. It's got 18 levels, some neat mechanics, and the thing I'm most proud of with it are some examples of level design that subtly teaches the player a mechanic without feeling too much like a tutorial or needing text on screen. It was made in a short time span, so it's not the most incredible thing you'll ever play, but it's another thing I can add to the pile of things I've finished. I do want to return to it and give it a lot more polish, maybe make a bigger version 2.0 of it, but that's a challenge for me for another day. That'll do it for this video. If you liked it, look forward to more. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you around.